Hi guys, welcome to another episode. Today we have a new guest with us. His name is Mo, and I wanted him to introduce himself. I didn't want to make like any introduction like sometimes I do with other guests. I wanted him to say what he wants about himself. So I'm giving him the word and welcome again, Mo. Take your time to introduce yourself, and so nice meeting you today.
Hi, Noor. So I'll just start off by covering the basics, right? So I was born in Egypt and I'm 26 years old now. And I typically would be labeled as a life coach or some kind of a spiritual teacher. But in all honesty, I don't really like these terms. Not that I have anything against them in of themselves, but I find them to be somewhat misleading and perhaps limiting to some extent to what I could potentially be providing. So it's the same as, for example, if I were to label myself as a writer or identify so heavily with something, it might limit my potential unfoldments in the sense of what I could potentially do later on. Because for so long I've identified as this, and then it kind of constricts me to what I could potentially become, right? So, yeah, I would say, like, simply put, as a way of describing myself, instead of a label, I would say I'm a guy who's genuinely interested, have always been like that, in all sorts of things regarding life as a whole. So, an actual life coach, if you might will, like in the sense of someone who actually talks about life as a whole. And in that regard, I've always been interested in philosophy and psychology, theology, science. I speak from my own studies, understanding of these topics. I am not a specialist in any of them, but I tend to observe quite a lot and apply whatever I learn and realize on myself first. And then once I have for sure confirmed that these things actually work, that they're actually realistic, that they're productive, then I start publishing them, then I start giving them to others.
This is why I left you to introduce yourself. I wanted you to clarify things for our audience the way you want them to be. I didn't
Hmm.
want to like label you in a specific box and then
Yeah.
people will just try to see you from the surface. So that's that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we start our questions today. I got this question from a follower on Instagram. I'm gonna start with this first. He said, how can we deal with haters and people who are harming us?
I see. Well, I'm pretty sure most people would find this relevant, right? Because,
Yeah, it's a
how.
common situation.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone really complains about this. I think the first time I found this topic to be interesting in a different light was many years ago when I was pretty much a teenager. And I remember at that point I was on Facebook, and then I had a really bad encounter with a friend of mine's. And then I wrote to myself as a status on Facebook. I wrote like fake friends, something like that. I was complaining. Yeah, it's very childish and all of that.
Yeah, we've all done that.
Yeah. And I was like, oh man, fake friends are everywhere, kind of thing. And I was kind of like indirectly sending a message to him, right? Calling him out on what he did. And the interesting thing that happened is that a day or two at most afterwards, I found the same person posting a status on Facebook complaining about fake friends. And I was like, wait a minute, like, how can you complain about fake friends? You know, you are one. And I thought like you would never be in a situation where someone comes like some sort of a fake friend and is like betrays your trust or something like that. I thought you're the one who does these kinds of things. So at first, my understanding of haters and fake friends and bad people in general was very simplistic and superficial in the sense that, okay, a bad person, they never encounter any bad people. There are the bad people, they do all the bad, nothing bad happens to them. But in truth, these are as much of people as any of us, right? So, like the haters, for example, they have haters themselves, right? There are people that hate on the haters, right?
Yeah.
So, I would say like instead of going about the cliche, simplistic manners like to ignore the haters or, if I may, fuck the haters kind of thing, Because if you went about it this way, you're really doing the same thing they're doing, right? You're hating the haters, and that makes you a hater, right? So instead, it's I'm not gonna ask you to love them because that would be almost impossible to be done, right? But instead, you should start with understanding them, like genuinely understanding them, not in the sense of like, oh yes, these are their insecurities, they're projecting it on me, and I understand, poor guy. Not in that sense. I mean, on some level, yes, insecurities and all that talk, but understand that they really cannot see anything else, that this perception of you, say, being like you think of yourself, say, as beautiful, right? And then someone else sees you as ugly. That's true in the sense that from that standpoint they can't help but finding you ugly. It doesn't mean anything objectively about who you are as a person in totality, but that's just one angle that is just as true as the other angle of you seeing yourself as beautiful. That's just a matter of preference, right? So when I receive such criticism or things like that, I try to not take it personally, but at the same time not ignore it altogether, and instead to try to see the truth in it. What is Because there is always something sincere in every statement of like whether you label it as hatred or constructive criticism, there is always something interesting in it, right? So for me, I just take whatever quote unquote negative comments, and I just look in the truth and what they have to say in there. What is the truth in that statement, right? And usually it leads to very interesting insights, especially if you have the right tools to dissect the statement and see where it's stemming out of and their motives, understand the psychology behind it and whatnot. Then it can become really interesting. But without the right tools, you pretty much are bound to choose between one of two ways: either to ignore them altogether and in some sense hate the haters, or to really buy into their comments so much that it influences your life negatively and without any productive manner, right? Because negativity is not really a bad thing, right? In its totality, the negative or the pessimists or the haters, they can be very beneficial to oneself. Like, for example, one day there was a guy who was very optimistic, very positive, and he was like, you know what, we should fly as human beings, let's make a plane. And then at some point there was some bad pessimistic guy, very negative, a hater, and he's like, what are you thinking about? Like, are you crazy? Like, the plane that will fall and we will die. So that's somewhat of in some sense, the person may feel like kind of let down by that thought, by that criticism. But without that negative, how people may tend to call him a bad person, we wouldn't have had parachutes in the first place, right? So everybody would have made the plane and then we flew, but no parachutes because no one is giving any negative criticism. So it's not all bad together. So I would say try your best to, instead of trying to love everyone, try to understand as many people as you can. And the more you understand them, the more the love unfolds naturally afterwards. You don't have to try to love them. You don't have to try to accept them. You just have to try to understand them. And once that's done, the love and the acceptance and all of these nice things, the compassion, they just unfold afterwards.
I definitely agree with that, especially when you said in the first part that we've all had to sometimes post on Facebook something, and then we saw that specific person also posting something similar to that.
Yeah.
And we used to question all the time, like, are you posting something that you're clashing your own self? You're actually talking about your own self? I used to see that a lot when I used to have Facebook, because I don't for years now. But at the same time, I totally relate. I don't know the person who asked, like, are you a teenager or are you a young adult? Because it differs. So it's not the same thing. You see it when you're young and when you're a little bit older.
Yeah.
So when I just remember myself, like, let's say 5, 6 years ago, when I used to be in high school or much younger than that, I'd say I'll hate the hater as much as they hate me. I'll focus on that. I'll feel bothered. I'll feel like judged. Why would they say that about me? Why would they hate me? I'll start just questioning as a young girl, why am I being treated that way? I don't deserve that. But once I'm a bit older now, I can say that I started seeing things differently. Like for 3 years ago now, 2 years, 3 years ago, I started seeing things from your own perspective, as you have been describing. I try to understand those people who talk about me or who hate on me, sometimes for no reason. And even when I ask them, they would say, I don't know, I just hate you. And I'm like, what?
I
But
can't help
then
it.
I'm like, you know what? Some people are like that. They would love you from the first sight. Some people would hate you from the first sight, and that's life. You're not supposed to be loved by everyone. Just remember that. Just like you yourself, you don't like everybody else. Know that some people out there won't like you as well. So it's kind of a circle that we go through, thinking that we might be loved by everyone, but believe me, that's kind of a hypocrisy. If everyone loves you, there is something wrong. That's
Yeah.
how I see it. There is something wrong. Either way, you're being a hypocrite and you're trying to
Mm.
make people love you, but this is not the real you.
Hmm.
Either way, there is something else. Please just check on yourself,
Yeah.
because this is weird. This is not how things normally should go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd
For sure.
say, as you have said, you have two options. Either way, you ignore them and just live your life normally, and remember that this is how life is. This is how it's supposed to be. Or try to understand them, as you have said, know why, and even if you can't know the reason, just accept it and give excuses to people. Just be like, okay, they have an issue. It's their issue. It's not mine.
Yeah.
I try to be as peaceful as I can toward these people. I don't do the same. I don't do the same shit they are doing to me, and that's that.
Yeah.
Like, remember, when you sleep at night, you should feel peaceful because you did great toward even your haters.
Yeah.
This is how I see it from my own perspective for the last few years. I'm like, okay, you know what? I made peace with myself. I made peace with these people, and that's it. It's gonna end here. Like, no more hate, no more like projecting my own flaws into them or their own flaws into me. I'm okay with it. This is how it goes, and that's that.
Yeah.
So I guess this is our answer for our friend who asked the question, and I hope we answered your question
Yeah,
and helped.
I would actually want to add something like a small metaphor that I tend to think about and tell people about it. So you can imagine yourself, well, I wouldn't say imagine even, because it's not that much of a difference between you and a tree, right? You're both a natural phenomena that happened on this planet, right? So there is a mango tree and there is an apple tree. And then you might stand in front of one of them and you might find some flaws in one tree, and then the other tree you might find like, oh, this one is better. Is it actually better than the other tree? No, it's not. It just depends on what you're looking for, right? So it's the same with you. When somebody perceives you and thinks of you about, like, in some sense dislikes things about you, in all truth, there is nothing fundamentally wrong about you. We don't have good and bad characteristics. We have characteristics. And based upon people's agendas, biases, and selfishness, and desires and preferences, these characteristics of ours get labeled and identified as good or bad, right? So I would say just to not take it in the sense of like, there is nothing wrong with me whatsoever. I mean, yes, there isn't anything wrong with you, but that doesn't mean you can't enhance and improve anything about yourself, because you're not here to remain still, right? You're here to change. You're here to evolve into something more, not necessarily better, but in the sense of that, if you were to imagine yourself standing barefoot on a bunch of rocks, say, and the longer you stand still, the more you start not feeling as uncomfortable anymore. You get used to it. You're not moving. You're not feeling the pain of standing on rocks. But at some point, some wind is gonna come and gonna give you a push, because you're not meant to remain still. So in the same way, it's not meant, just understanding that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with you or with them as well. It doesn't mean not changing anything at all, right? So it's a matter of finding the balance between not taking two things too personally and not ignoring them altogether. Somewhere in between there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And just a little FYI,
Yeah.
when I just reflect a little bit on my past, on the comments I got when I used to be much younger than this, that used to really, really hurt me.
Hmm.
I realized after all these years that some commands were true and I used to deny them. So there were some troubles on me and some like flaws that I was supposed to change and like improve myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I thought I took it so personally and I was like, no, I'm not like that. They're just they forgot all the things I have done for them and they just focused on that thing and
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all gone through this before. And when you once you grow up, you're like, they were right. At that time I was supposed to not deny and accept it and try to change.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm trying now to fix the things that I have and the struggles I'm facing with my own soul, but I'm like, as you have said, don't take it personal, but at the same time, yes, you should like think rationally about it, not emotionally, and say, do I actually have this flow? Did I actually hurt them? Did I do something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you should question yourself and you shouldn't just put it on their faces, on
Yeah.
their commands, and you're like, no, I'm okay. I'm not like that. They are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to think rationally about it and don't take it personal. And this is how you upgrade yourself.
Yep.
And you can distinguish between the right and the wrong sometimes, especially
Yeah.
in few situations where you made an argument or you just felt bad for a specific comment that have been said to you or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to deal with it rationally and not emotionally.
Exactly. And even if you got a trait that is commonly perceived as a bad thing, let's say that someone came up to me and he was like, "Oh, you're really cheap, right? That you don't spend money, you're holding so tightly on money, or something like that." Being cheap is something that is commonly between people frowned down upon. It's not a good thing. So then it's easy to think that, okay, there is actually something wrong with me that needs to be fixing. But not even the so called bad things or bad traits are actually fundamentally bad, right? Because it's just a matter of compatibility. In the sense that, say, for example, I'm really cheap. It doesn't mean that I necessarily must change that about myself, because I can easily surround myself with people that wouldn't find it a problem in the first place, and then voila, I no longer need to change anything about myself. So it really boils down to one thing: when you're confronted with some opposition of some opposite perspective about yourself, that something that you don't like, you don't think it's nice, or a negative perspective as people call it, when you're confronted with something like that, it's really a matter of choice at that point. Is that something that I want to change about myself? Because fundamentally there is nothing wrong, but is that something that I would like to change or not? It's really a simple choice, right? So that's why you don't have to take it too personally, and that's why you don't have to forget about it entirely. You can just think, do I really want to change that about myself? If yes, then change it. And you're not
Exactly.
people pleasing at that point, because you genuinely want to change it. If not, then find some other people and they wouldn't mind that trait about you in the first place, right? So yeah, that's
Yeah.
all.
To finish
Sure.
and to conclude about this question, remember that these people are not paying your bills, they're not living with you, you're not gonna marry them. So please
Yeah.
just don't give too much attention to these people. Focus on those who love you, those who are surrounding you, and that's that.
Hmm.
Just don't like focus on, as they say, the empty space of the little cup of water.
Yeah, yeah. I would honestly say that the cup is neither half full or half empty. It's actually both, right? So when I look at the cup, I like looking at both sides of it, right? And then it's just a matter of choice afterwards. So first, just become understanding and aware of the situation with as little bias as possible. Then make the choice based on your own preference. Do I want
Yeah,
to change that about myself? No.
yeah,
Then perhaps that person is not compatible with me and I should find someone else. Not that that person is bad
sure.
because they dislike this about me. They're not bad either. Just the same way that there is nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with them, right? It's just a matter of, like, it seems like this is incompatible. Do I want to put an effort to make this compatible? If yes, then go ahead. If no, then find someone else. That's about
It's
it, right?
about preferences.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
Okay, nice. I once again hope that we have answered your question and you felt a little bit better about it. Okay, so now we go to the next question. How can someone who doesn't believe in anything survive, since I know that a lot of people who are like non-religious, atheists or whatever, they end up committing suicide. And sometimes even religious people, I'm not like
Yeah.
gonna generalize.
Yeah.
Even religious people, sometimes they go into that life crisis and they
Mm.
just end their lives.
Yeah.
So how can we find something to survive?
Well, in terms of suicide from a religious person or the religious people, is usually their last resort because it's such a big sin to do that, right? So
Yeah.
they don't try to resort to that too quickly. But perhaps someone who's not religious, who's not following anything that gives them some sort of like a threat that if you did this, you will be punished, and if you didn't do that, you will be rewarded. In some sense, you could say that they don't really have a reason to be so concerned and hesitant about suicide or not, right? But at the same time, it's not like religion is the only thing that these people have or lack. There are people in their lives that they like very much and they care about them, that they wouldn't want to leave them behind or something. Or at least, since eventually they will leave them behind, but at least to spend more time with them, right? And the thing is, usually people who want to commit suicide, they don't actually want to kill themselves. They mostly want to kill things about themselves that are causing them a lot of suffering, and as a form of, say, desperation, if I may, they try to kill themselves altogether because they don't know how to take that specific part and change it and fix it. And I would argue that suicide is not the easy way out, because we have a natural instinct by default to survive, and to take the step to actually kill yourself. That's something, in some sense, it's extremely courageous. That's not easy at all, right? And as someone
Mm.
who've been through these things, I've seen how difficult it can get when you actually on the verge of suicide. You're about to actually do it, then you will see how much you don't really want to do that. It's actually
Yeah.
very difficult. So for such people who say are not religious, and even religious people that may just see no point of all of this, right? It's just a matter of not really trying to create meaning, because you can't really create it. You're actually, in some sense, already living it. Because if you're still alive till this moment listening to this, right? Or even people who are not even listening to this, why are you still alive, right? There is a philosopher named Albert Camus who put it really nicely, and he said that every single morning it's really a matter of one question: whether to kill yourself or to make a cup of coffee. It's basically, you make the same decision, the same choice, you make it over and over again every single moment, whether to continue or to stop. So someone who's still alive, even if they're suffering from so many different things, say nihilism, lack of meaning, depression, you name it, why are you still alive? Why haven't you done it yet? Because you don't really want to, right? And I'm not here trying to encourage you to do it, and I'm not here trying to take you away from it. I'm just here to bring your attention to the fact that you haven't done it. No matter how bad it is or it has been, you haven't done it yet. Why? Because you don't really want to do it. You actually like so many things about life and about yourself. And these things make you make the decision to make one more cup of coffee and to get out of the bed one more time, hoping that this time around will be different. And it could be different at some point, no matter how chaotic and messy and painful things have always been in the past. That doesn't have to be the case for the rest of your life. And that's the best thing about life, as I like to say, that every moment can be the starting point. Right now, you can make a shift. And it's not in the sense to blame yourself, oh, I should have done it earlier. In some sense, it doesn't matter if you haven't made that shift and that change earlier. Because if you could have done it, you would have done it. It's just that with the resources and the impact of the environment that had on you and your impact on it as well, it so happened that it wasn't suitable to make such a transformative, fundamental change in your life experience. So it's not something to be blamed on or to guilt yourself over that I have been like this for so many years. It's too late now. What's the point? You can always start now, right? And you don't have to start by trying to create meaning. You just have to become aware of the meaning that you are already experiencing, that is making you still alive. because that's the thing about creation and meaning. They are inseparable from one another. So creation, not in the sense of giving birth, creation in the sense of life experience altogether, all the events that happen. When these things happen, that gives birth to meaning, to value, to things that preferences. These things are valuable, these things are not to me. And because of that meaning that was given birth to, you start giving birth to more creation. More creation happens through you. So actually, creation and meaning, they're like two sides for the same coin, and the coin is life, right? So just the fact that you're still alive, you already have the meaning. You don't have to create it, right? And in some sense, in all honesty, life as a whole, from all perspective, from all truth, it doesn't have a meaning in the sense that it doesn't have a specific meaning written in stone out there flying somewhere in space. But that's the beauty about it. And it's something that, for example, I learned from a philosopher named Alan Watts. And it was a term called the meaning of the meaninglessness, right? Where you realize the meaninglessness of everything, but that in itself becomes a meaningful thing, because you then can start realizing that the reason it's, in some sense, all of it is entirely meaningless is because it includes so many meanings, very, very diverse meanings, that if you added them together, they will just cancel each other out and you would be left with the so-called zero-sum game, neutrality. It's not, it doesn't have a specific meaning, but that's because it's filled with so much meaning, right? So it circles back to not trying to have some wishful thinking or hope necessarily, because you don't need to attain these things, because you're not lacking the meaning in the first place. You are already living it. It's just a matter of becoming aware of it, becoming aware of the things that when you do are meaningful to you, regardless if it's meaningful in general or not, because no one specific meaning is meaningful in general to everyone, right? So that's really how I would go about it, in a simplistic way.
I just remembered when you were talking, I saw a TikTok last week, or it was recent, a video of a girl. She was really sobbing and crying, and there was a caption where she said, "Today it was another day where I didn't commit suicide. Not because I don't want to, but because I know that when I'll be gone, my parents will suffer."
Yeah.
And she has included another video of her parents taking care of her and loving her and stuff like that, and reflecting the idea that she was trying to push so hard on life just because of them, and she didn't want to take her life away just because of them. And
Yeah.
she said, for whoever, I guess as far as I remember, for whoever who wants to commit suicide, remember that there might be sometimes one person or something to stick to.
Yeah.
And she said, like, here is to another day where I'm still alive. And that
Yeah.
touched me so bad, because I knew that, that person who just uploaded the video, she was supposed to be dead a few hours ago, but she didn't do it. And I felt emotional for some reasons, because I know that a lot of people are struggling with that thought for years now, maybe for months, maybe for days, depends on each person and each case. But I felt it so bad, especially when you said sometimes when you're gonna do it, just a few seconds before you don't do it, you end up not doing it, and you feel like there's still something to stick to.
Yeah.
And I relate to that because I had that before. I was like, you know what? There must be something in this world to stick to.
Yeah.
And I tried to remember I started to feel the gratitude, even for the little things that I was not seeing, not noticing because of the darkness I was in. As the little girl said, her parents, maybe your siblings, maybe your partner, maybe your child, I don't know
Yeah.
who. And sometimes it's your dream, it's an achievement you want to do before you die. I don't know what that reason is or who might be that person, but I'm sure no matter how dark your life is, there must be a little light that you might stick to.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have any. Maybe you have like parents who are narcissistic. You don't have a partner. I don't know. I just don't know. But know that, as Mo said, as long as you're still alive, there is something that's stopping you from doing it.
Yeah.
And stick to that thing. Try to realize what that thing is. I know it's a hard situation. I don't know if any of our listeners today might relate. Maybe they might be in that situation now, or they had it before. But I don't know who wants to hear this. Please try to stick to something, because there is something worth sticking for.
Nice.
Um, and remember that you don't know what's gonna happen next. You die, and then what?
Yeah.
You are still, you have no idea what can happen after that, what afterlife holds. Are you going to be in a better place? Are you even guaranteeing that? You're not even guaranteeing that. Maybe if you stick to life, it's gonna be less you're gonna be in less hell than you might live after that.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's the opposite, I don't know. And nobody else knows, but
Yeah.
just try to think about it before you do it, because it's so sad, and I feel so emotional when it comes to this specific topic. It's kind of a tough topic to me to talk about, but I wish I could stop anyone from doing that, even by my words right now.
Yeah.
But know that people out there, they're gonna suffer after your death. No matter how much you think they hate you, even if they hate you, they would regret that immediately when you'll be gone. And it's not gonna be like the happy ending for them. Or sometimes we think that, okay, let me die so that my parents will feel better. Let me die so that friend will be like, will feel better. I'm a toxic person. I have no purpose in life and all that shit. I know these words. I know that list of negativity and emotions. I know them, but this is not reality actually. I don't know why, when we're just in a dark circle, we cannot think rationally. It's all emotional,
Hmm.
and it's all like our emotions and feelings like really, really draining us in that hole where we cannot see anything anymore. It's
Yeah.
like blank page, and that's that. I just want to do it. Sometimes you even forget why you want to do it, but you just want to do it, and that's that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
would
I really,
say the reason behind people, they are, as you said, some dark circle that they cannot see anything but darkness. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're in a dark room, you can't see anything
yeah,
but darkness, right? But in the way I see it is that even if you are in a very well lit, super lit room, you will still not be able to see anything. So too
yeah,
much of light, too much of darkness can be in some sense blinding, right? So the reason that people may have these kinds of struggles, and many of the struggles, if not all of them, is lack of clarity of perception, right? And the lack of clarity comes from being shaky in some sense, or you can imagine it as being physically shaky. If you're physically shaky like that, you may still see, but what you're seeing is as distorted as the intensity of the shakiness. So the more you're shaky, the more you can't really see. So it's a matter of balancing yourself, centering yourself, and once you're centered, the more still you are, the more you can see clearly. And it's not in the sense of being happy to see clearly, because over being in a state of over too much joy is not also a matter of stillness. You will be all over the place, and being depressive, that's not really a still state. So it's a matter of finding this point between the two extremes, where you're not on the edge of either side of it, and you're very much neutral, you could say, very much still. And then you can look at things. And when you do, you're gonna find things pretty clear for you, because you yourself are in a state of stillness, and thus you will see clearly, right? So, but at the same time, to get in that state of stillness in the first place, you need proper tools to get there, right? Because most people are going around trying to get things done, doing their best, but with the wrong tools. Obviously, you will get the wrong results, right? It's like trying to go to the moon by driving your car. You may
very
try as hard as you want, but you won't get there, right? And I'm not here trying to blame you for not having the right tools, but I'm here to point your attention that if things are not working out, if you can't figure it out, maybe because the tools that you're using, even if they were at some point very helpful, life changes and you are changing as well. And then these tools are the same. They need to be upgraded as well, right? So perhaps the tools are no longer relevant and it's time to upgrade your toolbox. And once you do that, you will start navigating through life with much more ease and simplicity than before, right? Because everything is changing all the time, and then if you don't ride the wave as it goes, you will be kind of outdated in some sense, even if just mentally outdated. And in that way, you need to improve yourself in some sense in order to start seeing things more clearly, right? So yeah, I would say, it's not all bad, it's not all good either, right? Because again, it's neither good or bad. In all truth, it's really a story that you're living, and a story is made out of chapters, right? So whatever that is going on, whether you see it as label it as a good thing in your life or a bad thing, it will come to an end eventually, right? And that may be liberating if it's a negative thing. Okay, finally it will go away. But that can be kind of a letdown if it's a good thing, because, oh no, I don't want it to go away. But you're not here to stick to a specific chapter. You're here to live the whole story out. And the whole story has so much beauty and wisdom in it than mere constant search for happiness. Because we're not actually looking for happiness per se. We're actually looking for something more fundamental than happiness, and it's fulfillment. We want to feel fulfilled, and fulfillment comes mostly from self-expression, and the other aspect of it is support for the other. That's what brings us fulfillment. So you may be very much happy in the sense of having all what you wanted, but at some point you might start feeling lacking and dull, because these things are no longer giving you the kick you were looking for. But fulfillment, when you're on that path, regardless of what is going on, you may still find appreciation for life itself, because life is a constant change of events. And to become so much in harmony with life is to, in some sense, sit and watch the change unfold without really being too attached or even too detached from what's happening, right? Because some people, they try to be so detached so that they don't experience any suffering. But you don't have to be too detached, because then you will not experience any fulfillment either, because you're way too far from it. And if you're way too close in the sense of holding on tight on it, it will dissolve eventually. It's not meant to stay, right? Existence is happening in the sense that it's ever expanding to more and more potentiality of what it could potentially become, right? So it's a matter of appreciating things as they are right now, feeling gratitude, feeling grateful for them, but letting them go when it's time, right? And then it becomes the key point here is to not to necessarily practice gratitude for the things that already are, because even those will go away, is to feel grateful for the ability to experience any gratitude at all in the first place. That in itself is a blessing. That's in itself is something to be grateful for, because being able to feel grateful, that can stay with you regardless of how things change. So if I'm grateful to have this thing or these people in my life, for example, that's good. But the ability to experience gratitude, that's the most important one. Because these people or these things may go away at some point. But I will still be able to feel gratitude for what is going to be what is going to replace them afterwards, right? So that puts you in a constant state of gratitude, not in the sense of not desiring anything else, not in the sense of not following your dreams per se. You may go about whatever you want, fulfill more desires, but at the same time feeling grateful for what already is. Then you go about your desires, your dreams, whether in the sense of making more money or having better relationships or whatnot, from a place of fulfillment, not from a place of lack, and that makes a whole lot of difference.
I saw people doing that activity in the morning, saying that like state 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for in order to have a good day, and also on the long term, you're gonna be happy. As you have said, sometimes we have like constant happiness, it's not gonna be forever, and sadness is gonna be forever. Things are changing, but at least it will make you feel stable during the day, and you'll get used to that, so that you won't keep on searching for happiness each day. And if nothing good happens, you're just gonna feel upset about it. And they stated also things apart, as you have said, from things that can leave you. Like, I'm grateful for breathing, I'm grateful for seeing, I'm grateful for hearing, and for drinking my cup of coffee, and all those little details that we go through, especially after COVID, like when we couldn't like go out, some people couldn't breathe because they were sick, all that.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are things that are like too simple. They won't change a thing, etc. But once I started doing that and feeling that deeply, and putting in mind the 2 years that we have spent at home doing nothing and feeling like it's the end of the world, I was like, I really should be grateful for that. Because for 2 years, I was scared to get COVID. I was scared to not have the ability to breathe. I was scared to lose my family members, although I lost a lot of family members. So I was like, maybe I shouldn't stick to material things or to people, but to stick into what I have physically and morally. So I'm still alive, I'm still breathing. I can sip my cup of coffee and enjoy it. I can go out for a walk, I can breathe,
Yeah.
and all that. At first, it seemed like kind of silly and nothing changed, but day by day, when it became kind of a habit, I started realizing how important it is, because when something bad happens during the day, I remind myself of the things I have said in the morning. And I try to deal in a calmer way,
Yeah.
not like get angry immediately or make a scene of it. So I try to be more rational than emotional, as I have said once again.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it might not work with anybody else, but you can just try it for a few weeks and then get your own conclusion about it.
Yep.
Because not everyone like deal with life in the same way. But for me, I try to, as you have said, try to think of things that we might be grateful for, because otherwise it's gonna be hard to stick to life, I guess.
Yeah, for
Especially
sure.
when things get rough and you'll get lots of problems all at once. It's gonna be like it's gonna be terrible, horrible, like
Yeah.
no word can describe it, because the feelings are too deep that, as we have said again, some people end up committing suicide and giving up on their lives and getting into depression, into severe depression, and sometimes a clinical case. So it's a matter of how you deal with life, and that's that, I guess.
Yep, for sure.
In the same circle, another question: how can we start finding our purpose in life? So we kind of tackled on how to stick to life, but now how to find the purpose,
Yeah.
like as we have said, the reason.
Yeah.
Even though there might be no reason, but if there is no reason, then why?
Yeah. Well, there is no, just like how there is no specific meaning, it doesn't mean that there are no meanings at all. There are a lot of them. And the same thing goes to life purpose. It's a really a big topic that so many people talk about, and I have a somewhat of a different take on it, in the sense that I don't like using the word purpose, because most people, they interpret the word purpose in the sense of a mission that they're here for, some kind of a goal. When I say purpose, I mean impact, which doesn't necessarily have to be a good one. It doesn't have to be a bad one either. It's just an impact, right? And you're constantly impacting everything around you, and everything around you is constantly impacting you. So in some way, you're not here to fulfill your purpose, or your life's purpose is your whole life altogether, every moment of it. Even the so-called mundane, small, trivial things, that is still your purpose, right? Even by dying, that's still your purpose, because that corpse is gonna be fed on by so many creatures, and that gonna circle around in the food chain, which will give to so much more life afterwards. Through that so-called dead body, it will give so much life out of it. So your life's purpose is every single moment of your entirety of it. So I would say that you don't necessarily need to have a specific purpose in the sense of a specific career or impact on life. I don't see my career as my purpose in life, even though I am deeply passionate about it more than you can imagine. But I don't see it as my only purpose in life. I have so many purposes, so many impacts, I should say, including the fact that I have about 40 cats that I take care of. That's one of my purpose. Yeah, that's one of my purposes in life, to take care of them, because they are as alive as I am, right? They have good and bad days. They have their own journey and stories that they're going through, and I happen to be a caregiver for them, at least in the meantime, right? And that's one of my purposes, which will eventually come to an end one way or another, right? I'm moving out soon to a different house, so I won't be able to take them with me. They're stray cats after all, and the other compound is not going to allow me to take them with me. And that pretty much ends my story with them for now, right? So if I were to be deeply identified as a caregiver for these 40 cats, and then when the time comes that this role that I was playing comes to an end, it will deeply hurt me. It's like someone who spent their entire life in the military, for example, serving their country, protecting it, all of that stuff. And one day, even if they don't want to, they were forced into retirement, for example. They're too old, they need to sit down now. And when they get to that point, or that they got injured, whatever, eventually they will leave, and they will no longer be serving the military. They will no longer have the role of the soldier, for example. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, what now? What do I do now? What's the point of living? Right? Because my job is done. My purpose in the sense of mission is over. There's no need to stick around, because they've been limiting their existence to one single reason, one single goal, mission, purpose, when in fact they have unlimited amount of purposes and impacts that they had on the entire existence without them even remotely grasping a small aspect of it. And when you really understand that just by you existing, just by you doing your own thing, like let's say that you even just went on a walk in a park, just minding your own business, zoned out in your mind, thinking about your stuff. As you go about doing so, you accidentally stepped on a roach, flattened it down, killed it. And that roach was a father that was going for a hunt to find food for his kids, and it died. And now the kids don't have anyone to take care of them, and now their story is going to be a bit different, where they're going to have to learn to feed themselves a bit early on, right? But at the same time, so you were a bad person on the roach family, right? But at the same time, you were a good person for a whole amount of ants that found a big meal for them. And you didn't even know any of this happened. You're just minding your own business, right? And it doesn't have to be in terms of insects. It can be something a bit like more scaled up, in the sense that you're sitting in a coffee shop, just looking through the window, having your coffee, zoned out, thinking about your stuff. And as you go about doing so, there is probably some person in the back, and they're just watching you, and you don't even know it. You don't even know that they exist in the first place, and they're just watching you, observing you. And let's say that that person was an artist, and that person started witnessing the things that you're doing, watching your body language, and bam, got inspired so much from how you are, without you even intending to do anything, without you intending to inspire them in the first place. And then they immediately just felt so inspired that they started writing down their inspiration so that they don't forget, and they rushed to leave to go to the workplace to actualize what they was inspired by. And because they were feeling so hyped up, they gave the waitress a big tip, which came in very handy because they were low on money. All sorts of things are happening around you and you're not even aware of it. Just thinking there, sitting at your coffee table, having your coffee and just zoned out and worrying, oh man, what's my purpose in life? And it's already happening around you. You're already doing it, right? So that's what I would recommend, right? In general, the more vague something is, the more you will experience a great deal of ease in your life and peace. But when it's something very specific, you're gonna be a very rigid kind of person, right? Where things must go in these specific ways, otherwise no good, right? But when your purpose in life is in the sense of an impact, that's a very spacious term. You can't possibly sit down and list all of the things that you will impact the world by. Because you may impact the world intentionally by, say, making music or drawing something or writing something, or even, like, I don't know, just having some kids and taking care of them. But the unintentional impact is ungraspable. You can't possibly list it down. And if you were, again, to the example of the tree, what is the purpose of the tree in the sense of an impact? Well, you may say, well, to give us some shade, perhaps, for some birds to have their homes in it, to build their nests in it. Maybe even you go as, I don't know, nuanced and complex in your thinking and be like, oh, perhaps for ants to live inside of it because that's where they live as well. Aside from the obvious things like oxygen and all of these things. But is that all there is to the tree? No. One of the purposes of the tree that are not thought about is for me to use it as an example right now, as a metaphor. Because if there were no trees in the first place, I wouldn't have been able to use this as example, right? One of the purposes of a tree is even a bad purpose or a bad impact for a thief to hide behind it after a robbery. For someone who's lost to sit underneath it for some shade, for a couple to carve their initials on it, all sorts of things. So purpose is, I would definitely recommend in understanding it in terms of impact, because that's the most honest interpretation of it. And when you have that very spacious perception of the word purpose, you can live your life with so much ease in the sense of intentionally doing things, right? Like having this talk, for example, that's me intentionally impacting life or other people. But at the same time, when there is no opportunity to have that kind of a talk, where there is, at some point, maybe it's possible that I will no longer have that career in the first place, I wouldn't be devastated because I never saw it as my sole purpose in life in the first place. But if I did, I would suffer so much afterwards, maybe even kill myself, because why live, right? But to really understand this, and of course I'm trying to keep it simplistic here, but if you were to really understand that, you would get to a point by just sitting, just existing, you would feel fulfilled without having to do anything at all. And it doesn't mean that you will live your life in a passive way, never accomplishing anything, never intentionally doing anything. No, go ahead. But there will be times where you will not be inspired. Say, if you're a writer, for example, there will be times where you're not getting any creative ideas. And that will eat you up, because I need to be creative. I need to fulfill my purpose, my role in life. But if you have that kind of understanding, you would just sit. Nothing to write, no inspiration is coming. You just exist. You just do other things. And the interesting thing is, as you go about doing these other things that seem to be somewhat unrelated to your career, you might unintentionally be inspired. And that's how people really, that's a smart way. If you say that if you forgot about something and you tried to remember what you wanted to say, the best thing to go about it is to talk about something else. The more you try to remember it, the more it will get difficult to actually remember. But sometimes when you're like, anyway, never mind, let me just, like, I don't know, what are we gonna eat today? And you're like, oh, by the way, I just remembered, yes, so I wanted to say this. And it's the same thing. Oh, I can't be inspired. If you have that spacious perception of the value of your existence, then when things aren't somehow working out, you wouldn't be devastated. You would just continue living your life because there is so much else to do. And in doing so, you might unintentionally be inspired and go back to your favorite activity or passion once again. So yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me, like, months ago I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, and my laptop was in front of me and I was trying to study, and I had like the writer block, as you have said, for months now. I couldn't write anything.
Hmm.
But I saw a girl, as you have said, she was so beautiful. She had like curly hair, and she seemed like creative, like an artist.
Yeah.
Even the way she dressed, the way she was reading the book,
Hmm.
and at that specific moment, exactly, like she was doing nothing. She was just sipping her cup of coffee, reading a book, and sometimes like daydreaming and looking to the window. But at that specific moment, she inspired me to write something, and I went like
Hmm.
directly to write it. And then when I went back home, I was at my lowest at that period of time, and I was like, I wonder what that girl is going through. Because for a moment, she seemed, sad. Like her facial expressions were not really a happy person. Like she was
Hmm.
daydreaming from now and then. She had like a small phone, it's not even a smartphone. So I was like, how simplistic is that? She didn't even bring her smartphone. Maybe she doesn't have any.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like we're all going through shit in here. We're
Hmm.
all trying to make every day better than the day before.
Yeah.
And I was like, I guess this is a reason why I'm here today. Because as I have said, at that specific day I was at my lowest, and I had tons of revision and I had exams, and I was like really fed up with all the school thing.
Hmm.
But when I saw her, I got inspired of why I'm here. Why am I still trying to study, and why did I start at first, and all that. So as you have said, she made a purpose for somebody while she didn't even notice.
Yeah.
And I was gonna like talk with her, but I was like, maybe she'll find me weird, so I'm just gonna step ahead, not do that. But I'm gonna remind myself of that girl every time I feel at my lowest. And
Hmm.
trust me, every time I go to that coffee shop, I try to like see around, maybe she's there. I didn't find her since then, but still, she left an impact on me that day. And because of her, I wrote something creative. And at the same time, I went back home like happier, at least more
Hmm.
motivated.
Hmm.
And that was pretty cool, actually. So, yeah.
Nice. That's a really, really nice story, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
this ties exactly to the very famous mainstream teaching now that your worth is inherent, that your worth is untouchable, and all of that. This is exactly why your worth is untouchable. Because just by you existing, whether you're fulfilling your biggest dreams or not, that in itself is very valuable. That in itself is very important, right? Just by eating things, just by drinking, as simplistic as it can get, that's your purpose in your life. You don't need to do all sorts of big moments, achievements all the time, right? You can just simply be without necessarily having to always do, right? But of course, some people may take that kind of understanding in a sense of just like YOLO, you only live once. I don't need to do anything. I can just sit around. Well, sure, you can, but if you kept on doing it like that, if you remain passive, you would start experiencing the lack of fulfillment in your life, right? And you start feeling somewhat depressed. And because you're not meant to really stick around and not do anything. So it's a matter of understanding why exactly your worth is inherent by default. Just by you existing, you're already successful, you already fulfilled it. Just by living your life, that's your purpose. But at the same time, intentionally also doing things. Because your purpose, your impact on the world, happens through you unintentionally and intentionally. So it's by, for example, me having this talk, but at the same time is also by me just sitting around and doing my own thing without necessarily making some kind of an achievement, right? So it's a balance between working too hard, the hustle culture, and, for example, like being hippie, like in some sense of being very passive in your life, not doing anything. Somewhere in between those two extremes, you can find the harmonic balance where you just do things, but at the same time allow yourself to sometimes not do and not feel lacking. because I don't actually need to actively do anything. I can just be. I can watch Netflix every now and then and just binge watch a show. That's okay. But at the same time, if you kept on binge watching shows every single day, you will feel drained, because that's not the only thing you're supposed to do either, right? So whether you're creating work, like say an artist doing for a living something they enjoy, creating art, and that is such a great opportunity that many people lack, for example. But even that, if they kept on creating art every single day and working so hard on it, they will get drained. So it's like you can think of life and yourself as a guitar, and you like if you put too much tension on the strings, they will get destroyed. And if you didn't put any tension at all, in other words, if you didn't practice the guitar, the strings will start getting lean and in some sense get destroyed. So it's a matter of putting the right amount of tension, in the sense of like at least once a day or something, playing the guitar a bit, right? At least once, at least like every day, doing intentionally doing something meaningful, something fulfilling to you personally, regardless if it's not objectively or in general meaningful, or in the grand scheme of things it doesn't mean much. Regardless of that, it's meaningful to you, and so you need to at least once a day do something intentionally that fulfills you. But at the same time, you also need to not do, because again, too much tension is no good, too little tension is no good either. So those two options, those two extremes, they lead to destruction. The balance in between leads to creation. So you start being in flow, not in the sense of being passive, but in the sense of effortless action. So effortless action doesn't need to be easy tasks. For example, like somebody may go to the gym, for example. That's not an easy thing. It requires effort. But if that's very meaningful to you, it will feel as if it's effortless. You wouldn't really suffer along the effort. So there will be the physical effort, but from that physical effort that you're putting in, there is fulfillment coming out of it. But some other activity for you, for example, if you were to do that doesn't really inspire you in some way or another, if you were to put effort in it, it will really feel like effort. It will feel like you're trying so much. That's not what I advise to do. I advise to do the things that naturally you feel pulled towards. Because the things you naturally feel pulled towards are the things you would really experience a lot of fulfillment in it, through it. And it doesn't have to be easy either, right? Although naturally the things that you're good at will be the things that are the easiest for you. But for example, I'm good at what I do, whatever that I do, but that doesn't mean that it's easy in every possible sense. No, I hit a lot of paradoxes, right? Where I go with my train of thought and my research, my observation, direct experience, and all of that. I a lot of times hit dead ends, paradoxes, and that's no good for me personally. It doesn't make me feel satisfied, and it's no good because I can't even pass it along to other people because it's a dead end. I'm pretty sure that if they went the whole path that I took, they would eventually hit the dead end, and why would I pass that to them, right? It's not productive in any way. So when I hit dead ends, that's okay, right? But then I put effort in that part to, even if it's something that genuinely or generally is enjoyable and easy for me, sometimes it can be difficult as well. So that's why there's always room for improvement and all that talk, right? So yeah.
I just daydreamed while you were talking because it all makes sense, you know. Or what you have said is kind of what we're living, and it is just, it's amazing how you see that life is just something so unexpected. Like you get things unexpectedly, you live things unexpectedly. Sometimes things cannot go to the same plan you've tried to put into papers, like, and you just have to accept it. You just have to live with it. And as you have said, live intentionally and do it spontaneously, and you just have a purpose every day that's different from the day before.
Yep.
And you might have been a good influence to somebody without knowing it. just as I have said, the example of the girl I saw in the coffee shop. And there are like so many other examples that I have lived before. Some of them I have even forgotten, but what I'm sure of, that seeing people and like gazing at them sometimes gives me inspiration. And I'm sure each one of us has something specific that they do
Hmm.
to daydream, to get inspired, to try and find a good reason to make it that specific day. So
Yeah.
it's like unbelievable how wide the world is and how our mind works and how our body functions.
Yeah.
It's different and each person is different, but I guess we should like all stick to life. So we have the same goal, which is sticking to life, but it differs. Each person differs, each life differs. The experiences also are not the same. So it's kind of inspiring, really, to hear from others and speak up out yourself too, so that people get inspired from you too.
Yeah.
And I really, really like enjoyed our talk today, which made me like question some new stuff and at the same time realize some stuff. And I got answers also for some questions that were like turning into my head
Yeah.
and messing with my head and my thoughts, which I'm sure that even some people might like find a good thing in this specific episode where it helped them, like even 1%.
Yeah.
I'll still be happy for that. I'll still feel glad that we changed something or we fixed something that was kind of blurry in their minds.
Hmm.
Um,
I actually
like,
had other questions that I was asked, but perhaps some other time we can have a call
yeah,
and talk about
yeah,
these things. But it was a good talk, and I'm
I
glad
really
you had
enjoyed
me here.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
I would gladly like have you as a guest another time, like anytime sooner
Sure.
once you're free. And really, thank you for being here. I
Thank
really,
you for
really
having me.
appreciate it. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And I hope our listeners also enjoyed it. It
Yeah.
was kind of long, but it was like full of answers, full of energy. And I really loved that. I
Yeah.
even daydream sometimes while you talk because I remember some stuff that I can relate to,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people out there too would do that because we talked really about reality. It's like non-fiction, and it's something that we go through. Like each person go through it differently, but it's the same thing. It's the same cause.
Yeah.
So that was inspiring, really.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I'm glad too.
All right.
Anyway, thank you so much, Mo, for being here with me.
Thanks for having
Hoping
me.
to see you soon. Hoping to hear from you soon. And good luck in whatever you're doing.
Thanks, you too.
You have a great
You too. All right.
afternoon or night.
All right.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Bye.